Dear beloved, across the world, we've shared countless testimonies of faith, stories of men and women who encountered the living God in the most unexpected ways. From distant nations to the very heart of places once thought unreachable, God continues to reveal His power. But today's story is unlike anything you've heard before. You are about to witness a divine encounter that shook the very ground of Somalia, a land known for its deep roots in Islam. In one unforgettable night, 4 Muslim women, each firmly grounded in their faith, experienced a supernatural move of God that changed their lives forever. How could this happen? What did they see? And how did the name of Jesus become the turning point that transformed their entire family? Prepare your heart, because this testimony will not only challenge your understanding of faith but awaken something deep within your spirit. My name is Hafsat, and I was born in a quiet town near Mogadishu, Somalia. I grew up in a strongly devoted Muslim family where faith and tradition guided everything we did. My father was respected in our community, and my mother was known for her gentle heart and deep devotion. We were 3 daughters, my 2 elder sisters, Fatima and Zahara, and me, the youngest. Though I was the smallest, I was often called the most curious one, always asking questions that sometimes made my mother sigh and say, "Hafsat, some things are not for children to ask." Our home was always filled with the call to prayer, the soft voice of my father reciting from the Quran, and the sound of my mother's prayers whispered over us every night. My father had dreams for us, that each of us would marry respected men of faith, men who would carry on the honor of our family. And in time, that dream began to unfold. When I was about 14, my eldest sister Fatima got married to an imam from another city. It was a day filled with joy and pride for our father. I remember how he smiled as he prayed for her and said, "May Allah bless your home with peace and children." The entire neighborhood celebrated. Fatima looked so happy that day, her face covered with a golden scarf and her hands decorated with henna. I watched her leave with her husband, and I imagined myself one day having a similar wedding. For the first few months, everything seemed fine. But as time went on, things began to change. Fatima started coming home more often, and her visits were no longer full of laughter. She would sit quietly beside our mother, her eyes red from crying. One night, I overheard her telling Mama that her husband's family had started mocking her because after 3 years, she still had no child. I didn't understand everything at the time, but I could feel her pain. I used to sit with her and ask, "Why do you cry so much, sister?" She would only smile weakly and say, "You're too young to understand, Hafsat." Our home, once always cheerful, slowly began to change. My father, though still strong in his faith, carried a heavy silence in his eyes. He loved all of us deeply, but I could tell that my sister's troubles began to weigh him down. Still, he never complained. He would simply say, "Allah knows best." 3 years after Fatima's marriage, Zahara, my second sister, also got married to another imam. The whole family rejoiced again, and my father said it was a new beginning. But deep inside, I noticed the way Fatima's face fell whenever people congratulated Zahara. It was as though she was happy for her sister, but afraid that the same pain might visit her too. As the youngest, I tried to keep everyone smiling. I would sing, help Mama in the kitchen, and sit near my father when he looked sad. But I didn't know that our family was entering a season that would change our lives forever. As the months passed after Zahara's marriage, our home began to echo with silence more than laughter. My father would often sit outside under the big neem tree, staring into space, his prayer beads rolling slowly between his fingers. I was still too young to understand the full depth of his thoughts, but I could sense a heaviness in the air. Every time he received a letter or phone call from one of my sisters, his eyes would dim a little more. 2 years after Zahara's marriage, the same story that haunted Fatima began to unfold again. Zahara, too, remained childless. At first, her husband showed patience and understanding, but slowly things began to change. When she visited home, she would try to smile, but her eyes told another story, eyes filled with sleepless nights and quiet pain. I would often wake up in the middle of the night and hear her muffled sobs from the room she shared with Fatima whenever they were both home. It was heartbreaking for me to see my once cheerful sisters now so broken and unsure of themselves. Rumors began to spread among neighbors, whispers that our family was under some kind of curse because two daughters of an honorable imam's household could not bear children. My mother tried to remain strong, praying more fervently and fasting often, believing that somehow Allah would restore our dignity. But my father was not the same. His health began to fail slowly. He would clutch his chest sometimes after long silences, and Mama would rush to bring him water. I remember one evening when I found him sitting alone, tears silently rolling down his cheeks. It was the first time I ever saw him cry. He said softly, "A man can handle many things, Hafsat, but watching his daughters in pain breaks him differently." Not long after, my father was taken to the hospital after suffering from what the doctors called high blood pressure. We prayed endlessly for his recovery, but his condition only worsened. One night, while we were all gathered around his bed, he looked at us and whispered a blessing over each of us. His voice trembled as he prayed that peace would return to our home. The next morning he was gone. His death shattered our world completely. Our once strong family now felt lost and broken. Fatima and Zahara both came home for the burial, their faces pale and weary. We cried together for days. I felt like a piece of my heart had been torn away. My mother was inconsolable, and I felt helpless watching her sit beside his grave every morning, whispering words I couldn't hear. During those days of mourning, something strange began to happen to me. I started having dreams that felt more real than waking life. I would see children trapped in a dark underground house, crying and reaching out for help. Their faces were pale, and their tiny hands stretched toward me, calling my name in soft, trembling voices. Guarding them was a huge, terrifying creature, dark as night, with eyes like fire. I would always wake up trembling, drenched in sweat, my heart beating so fast I could barely breathe. At first, I thought it was grief playing tricks on my mind. But the dreams kept coming again and again, each time clearer and stronger than before. And somehow, I felt deep within that these dreams meant something connected to what my family was going through. The night before my father's burial, I couldn't sleep. The house was quiet, but I could hear the faint sobs of my mother from her room and the whispering prayers of my two sisters in the next room. I lay on my mat, staring into the darkness, feeling a heavy presence around me, a kind of sorrow that words couldn't describe. My heart was full of questions. Why did this happen to us? Why did my sisters have to suffer? Why did my father have to die this way? At some point, I drifted into sleep, and that was when the dream came again, stronger and more vivid than ever before. I found myself standing in a dark place, colder than anything I had ever felt. In front of me was that same underground house, covered in heavy iron chains. I could hear children crying inside, their voices weak and desperate. Their cries echoed through the darkness, calling my name over and over, "Hafsat, help us, please." As I stepped closer, the ground began to shake, and from the shadows emerged the same monstrous creature I had seen before, taller than a man, its skin as dark as coal, and its eyes burning like two flames. Its growl sent chills down my spine, and I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. Fear gripped me so tightly that I couldn't even speak. Just as I thought the creature would strike me, a light appeared from above, bright and pure, unlike anything I had ever seen. The light surrounded me completely, and I felt a peace I had never known before. From within the light, a voice, calm, gentle, yet full of power, spoke to my heart. He revealed to me that I should not be afraid, that this was not just a dream, but a call to stand in faith. He let me know that the children were symbols of many things that had been locked away: hope, joy, fruitfulness, and that I must take a bold step of faith to set them free. Suddenly, a strange strength filled me. I no longer felt afraid. I turned toward the creature and spoke with a courage that surprised even me. I rebuked it, declaring that it had no power to keep those children captive. As soon as I did, the creature let out a terrible cry, bowed down as if in defeat, and disappeared into the darkness. The chains around the underground door broke, and I turned back to see my two sisters standing behind me. They looked confused but ready to follow. I told them to go and bring out the children, and they moved quickly toward the open door. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd be truly honored to have you join this growing family of faith and reflection. Every new heart adds something beautiful to our community. As you listen to this powerful testimony of transformation, we'd love for you to be part of the conversation. Share where you're watching from and what stands out to you in this journey. Your thoughts and reflections aren't just comments. They help shape a genuine dialogue around experiences that have the power to change lives. But just as they were about to enter the room where the children were, I suddenly woke up, gasping for breath, tears flowing down my face. My whole body was trembling, and my heart was beating so fast it felt like it would burst out of my chest. Without thinking, I cried out the name of Jesus. I didn't know why that name came to my lips. It just poured out from deep inside me. When my mother and sisters rushed to my room, I was still shaking. I tried to explain what I saw, but the words wouldn't come out right. My sisters were frightened. My mother tried to comfort me, saying it was just a dream, but I knew it wasn't. Something inside me told me that this dream carried a message, something beyond what I could understand at that moment. Life after my father's burial felt like walking through an endless storm. Everyone in the family was still grieving, but somehow, the atmosphere in the house became even heavier as the weeks went by. My sisters, Fatima and Zahara, had stayed longer than expected because Mama didn't want to be alone. The three of us tried to help her cope, but it was clear that each of us was fighting our own private battle. Then, barely 3 months after we buried our father, another wave of sorrow struck. Fatima received a letter from her husband, a divorce letter. He accused her of bringing bad luck to his home and said that her childlessness was a curse he could no longer bear. 9 days later, Zahara's husband sent a similar letter through a family friend. The same cruel words echoed again: barren, cursed, rejected. I will never forget the sight of my two sisters sitting on the floor that evening, their letters clutched in their trembling hands, tears running endlessly down their faces. My mother broke down completely. She tried to speak but couldn't. The pain was too much for her heart to carry. I remember sitting beside them, unable to cry, feeling an emptiness I didn't know how to explain. The whole community soon heard about it. Some neighbors whispered in pity, others in judgment. People said our family had fallen under divine punishment. Others said my father must have offended someone before his death. I tried to shut out their words, but they kept echoing in my mind. One evening, I gathered enough courage to tell my mother about the strange dream I had been having. I told her about the underground house, the crying children, the beast, and the light that appeared. She listened quietly, but when I mentioned the name of Jesus, she grew uneasy. She said I should never speak of such things again, that it was not from our faith. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the peace that name brought me whenever I whispered it alone in my room. Days later, when everyone was asleep, I sat on my bed with my phone and began searching online about people who had seen Jesus in dreams. I read stories of people from different countries, Muslims, Hindus, and even atheists, who said they had encountered him in visions. Many described that same peace I had felt. My heart began to stir with curiosity and hope. Could it be that what I saw was real? I wanted answers, but I was afraid to talk to anyone. Then one afternoon, while helping my mother at the market, I noticed a small church nearby. For reasons I can't explain, I felt drawn to it. A few days later, I returned there secretly. I waited outside until I saw a man coming out, holding a Bible. He looked kind. I approached him and asked softly if he was the pastor. He smiled and said yes. My voice trembled as I told him I needed to ask questions, but that it must stay between us. From that day on, the pastor and I began to talk, mostly over the phone. I told him about my dreams, my family's troubles, and the pain that seemed to follow us. He never judged me. Instead, he encouraged me and explained that sometimes God reveals himself through dreams to lead people into his truth. He said what I saw could be a message of freedom, not just for me, but for my family too. His words gave me a strange kind of courage, though I didn't understand everything yet. I began to pray silently at night, whispering to the one I had seen in the light, asking him to show me what to do next. Weeks turned into months, and though our pain was still raw, something gentle began to shift inside our home. My sisters were still heartbroken from their divorces, and there were nights when I could hear them crying silently in their rooms. But little by little, I began to see small signs of life returning. A soft smile here, a shared meal there, and moments when laughter tried to break through the heaviness. Mama was still struggling too. She had lost her husband and watched her 2 daughters return home in shame, and yet she kept fighting to keep the family together. Every morning she would wake up early, prepare tea for everyone, and remind us that we were still a family, still loved, still blessed, even if it didn't feel that way. During that time, I continued speaking with the pastor in secret. He became like a quiet light guiding me through confusion. Whenever I felt lost, I would send him a message or call late at night, and he would listen patiently. He explained that pain does not always mean punishment and that sometimes God allows brokenness so he can rebuild what was lost in a more beautiful way. His words stayed with me. I started to read small portions of the Bible online, especially at night when everyone was asleep. I didn't understand everything, but somehow, it brought peace to my heart. One evening, I gathered the courage to speak to Mama again. I told her that I believed God still had a plan for our family, that we didn't have to live in shame or fear anymore. She didn't argue this time. She just looked at me quietly, then asked, "What kind of plan do you mean, Hafsat?" I told her about how I had been speaking with a Christian pastor, how he never forced me into anything but only taught me about hope, forgiveness, and peace. She was silent for a long time, then nodded slowly. That night, for the first time, Mama joined me when I prayed. She didn't say much, but her eyes were wet with tears. As days passed, I began to share gentle words of hope with my sisters too. At first, they didn't respond much, but I kept reminding them that life wasn't over. I told them they were still precious, still capable of being loved, and that God could restore what they had lost. There were times when Zahara would suddenly start crying during our talks, and Fatima would walk out quietly, but I knew something was changing inside them too. Slowly, I noticed how our home no longer felt so dark. It wasn't because all our problems disappeared, they hadn't, but because something different was now living in us. A quiet strength, a new kind of peace. Mama began cooking again with joy, singing softly as she worked. My sisters started helping her, talking more, even laughing sometimes. One night, as we all sat outside under the stars, I felt an overwhelming desire to bring everything into the light, to let them all hear what I had experienced in full. That was when I decided to invite the pastor to our home. I didn't know how my family would react, but something deep inside told me that it was time. It was a quiet Thursday evening when I finally gathered enough courage to do what my heart had been leading me to do. The air outside was cool, and a soft breeze blew through the curtains. I told my mother earlier that day that the pastor I had spoken with wanted to visit and share some words of encouragement with the family. She hesitated at first but finally agreed, saying softly, "If it will bring peace to this house, let him come." By evening, the lamps were lit, and the room was filled with the smell of the food Mama had prepared. My 2 sisters sat on the rug, side by side, silent but curious. I could feel the tension. No one really knew what to expect. When the pastor arrived, he greeted everyone politely, his tone humble and respectful. He sat down quietly, and for a moment, no one said a word. Then Mama gestured for me to speak. I took a deep breath and began to tell the story I had been carrying inside me for months. I spoke slowly, my voice trembling at first, but as I continued, I felt a strange strength filling me. I told them about the first dream, the underground house, the crying children, and the dark creature that stood guard. I explained how the light appeared and how I felt a voice speak to my heart, telling me to take a bold step of faith and set the children free. As I spoke, my sister's eyes widened. I could see tears forming. I told them how I had rebuked the creature and how, when I did, it vanished, and the door to the children's prison opened. I told them how they both appeared in the dream beside me, ready to rescue the children, and how, just as they were about to enter, I woke up crying, calling the name of Jesus without even knowing why. By the time I finished, my face was wet with tears. Mama was crying too. Fatima held Zahara's hand tightly, and both of them looked at me as if they were seeing me for the first time. The pastor sat quietly for a while, letting the silence sink deep into the room. Then he began to speak gently. He let us know that sometimes, what we see in dreams are not just dreams, they are spiritual messages showing us what's happening in unseen places. He revealed that the children in my dream represented everything our family had lost: joy, peace, fruitfulness, and freedom. The beast, he said, was a symbol of darkness and fear that had kept our family bound for years. He explained that when I rebuked the creature, it was a sign that God had begun to set us free, and when I called the name of Jesus, it was because that name carries power, the power to break every chain. His words pierced deeply into our hearts. Mama started to sob quietly, whispering that she had never felt peace like that before. Fatima began to cry uncontrollably, saying she felt as if something heavy had been lifted off her. Zahara knelt down and covered her face with her hands, shaking as she prayed silently. I could feel the whole room change, like a warmth filled every corner. The pastor then read from his small Bible, sharing words about healing, forgiveness, and new beginnings. He said that God wanted to use our pain, the loss of our father, the broken marriages, and the years of shame, as a testimony of His power to restore what seems impossible. He told us that our story wasn't ending in sorrow, but beginning in grace. That night, something broke inside me, but it wasn't pain anymore. It was freedom. When the pastor finally prayed for us, I closed my eyes and felt tears streaming down my face, but they were tears of peace. I didn't fully understand everything that was happening, but I knew deep within that our lives had just changed forever. After that night, our home felt completely different. It wasn't just the walls or the air. Something deep inside every one of us had changed. The silence that once carried pain now carried peace. The same rooms that had echoed with crying now carried the sound of quiet prayers. My sisters started waking up early to join me when I prayed, though they were still learning what to say. Mama began reading small passages from the Bible the pastor had given us, her fingers tracing each line slowly as if she was discovering a new world. We didn't suddenly become free from troubles. No, the struggles were still there. People in the neighborhood began to notice changes in our habits. Some whispered, others asked questions. A few warned Mama that she might be losing her faith, but she always smiled gently and said, "I'm only finding peace." One afternoon, the pastor called to check on us and shared more about the importance of forgiveness. He explained that healing cannot come without letting go of bitterness. That day, Fatima and Zahara both broke down again. They confessed how deeply they still hated their ex-husbands for the rejection and shame they had caused. But as we prayed together, I watched something beautiful happen. Their tears turned into surrender. Fatima said quietly, "If God could forgive me, then I will forgive them too." It was one of the most peaceful moments I had ever witnessed. As days went on, my sisters began to smile more, help around the house, and even visit neighbors again. Zahara started baking bread for people around us, and Fatima began teaching small children in the neighborhood. Slowly, I began to see that the heavy darkness that once hung over our family was lifting. One night I had another dream, but this one was different. I saw a beautiful garden filled with children playing joyfully. There was no darkness, no fear, no beast. The same gentle light I had seen before appeared again, brighter and closer this time. He let me know that our deliverance had begun and that the joy we lost was being restored piece by piece. I woke up crying again, but these were tears of hope, not fear. When I told my mother about it, she smiled and said, "I believe it, my daughter. God is truly with us." For the first time in years, I saw her eyes shine the way they used to when my father was still alive. We continued to meet with the pastor quietly, learning more about Jesus and the message of love and redemption. Everything he taught us seemed to match what we had already begun to feel: peace, forgiveness, and hope. Our faith grew quietly, like a small flame that refused to die. It wasn't always easy. Some of our relatives stopped visiting us. A few even spoke harshly about Mama for allowing such change in her house. But no matter how many challenges came, something inside us held firm, a strength that didn't come from us but from the one who had rescued us from darkness. And though we didn't know what the future held, we were no longer afraid to face it. It had been almost 2 years since that unforgettable night when the pastor first visited our home. By then, the changes in our lives were no longer hidden, they were visible in everything we did. Peace had become our new rhythm. Smiles had returned to faces that once only knew sorrow. Even our neighbors began to notice that something different was happening in our family, though not everyone understood it. Mama often said, "When peace comes from God, it doesn't need to shout, it just stays." Those words became something we lived by. As time passed, one by one, my sisters began to experience things that felt nothing short of miraculous. Fatima, who once thought she would never be loved again, met a kind man through a family friend. He wasn't from our past circle, he was a Christian who lived with humility and faith. What surprised us most was how gentle he was when he came to visit our home to ask for her hand in marriage. He didn't care about her past, he only said he wanted to build a future with her. Their wedding was small but filled with peace, laughter, and joy that words can hardly describe. Not long after, Zahara met someone too, another Christian man who worked with an aid organization in Mogadishu. He was patient and wise, and from the first day they spoke, she told him everything about her past. He listened without judgment and said, "Pain does not define who you are, grace does." That moment changed her completely. Watching both my sisters walk down a new path gave me so much joy that I often cried in secret, thanking God for restoring what we thought was gone forever. Months later, Fatima called one morning crying, but this time, they were tears of joy. She was pregnant. We all shouted and cried together, thanking God for His mercy. 6 months later, Zahara gave us the same news. When both of them gave birth, each to a baby boy, our house once again echoed with laughter, baby cries, and songs of thanksgiving. Mama could hardly contain her joy. Every time she held the babies in her arms, she would whisper, "You are the signs of God's mercy." As for me, I continued walking in faith quietly, helping Mama care for the babies and visiting the pastor's small fellowship. The peace I felt inside was growing deeper each day. Sometimes I would remember my father and wish he had lived to see this joy, but I also knew he would be happy knowing his daughters had found healing and love again. It was around this time that I met someone too, a gentle man named Daniel who served in the same small church the pastor led. We started as friends, often sharing stories about faith and life. His kindness reminded me of everything I had prayed for. Over time, our bond grew stronger, and after months of prayer and guidance, we were married in a simple ceremony surrounded by the same people who had once prayed with us in our darkest times. Now, as I tell this story, I'm carrying my first child. Every time I feel the baby move, I am reminded of how faithful God has been, how He turned our mourning into dancing and our shame into testimony. As I sit here, writing these words, feeling the gentle movement of life within me, I cannot help but look back at the journey that brought me here. Every tear, every fear, every sleepless night, every question, they all led me to this truth: God never leaves us, even when we do not understand what He is doing. There were moments when I wanted to give up, moments when it felt like prayer was pointless and hope was a dream too far to reach. But I learned that sometimes, when it feels like God is silent, He is actually preparing a miracle behind the curtain of time. I want to speak from my heart to anyone reading or listening to my story, especially those who feel lost, forgotten, or abandoned by life. Please, do not let your situation decide how much you trust God. Pain may visit you, but it cannot stay forever when faith opens the door to God's healing. I have seen with my own eyes how light can find its way into the darkest places. When you face trials, don't run away from God, run to Him. When you feel confused, hold on to His word and whisper His name. When everything around you seems to fall apart, remember that sometimes God allows something to break so that something greater can be rebuilt on truth. I have learned that following Jesus does not mean a life without storms. It means having peace in the storm. It means knowing that even when everyone turns away, He stays. He strengthens the weak, comforts the brokenhearted, and restores what life has stolen. My family is a living proof of that. We lost so much, yet God returned everything in His own way. The same tears that once watered our pain now water our joy. The same voices that once cried in sorrow now sing in thanksgiving. To all believers, I say this: don't compare your story with another's. God is writing a different chapter for you. Trust Him through your pain, obey Him through your confusion, and love others through your healing. Forgive quickly, pray often, and let your heart stay soft before God. And to those still searching for truth, He is closer than you think. Even if you don't understand everything now, just call on Him with a sincere heart. He will hear you. He will reveal Himself to you in ways you never imagined. As for me, I will keep sharing what He has done. I will keep telling the story of hope, because once I saw darkness and cried out in fear, but today I live in light and peace. So wherever you are reading this, remember this simple truth: God's love can reach you too. Your story is not over. Keep believing. Keep praying. Keep trusting. Because the same God who restored us will do it for you.